Welcome to the Darnell and Cody show. Today we're going to talk about Pete Buttigieg, continue our candidate series, and compare him with Yang. Both Andrew Yang and Pete Buttigieg have similar views, but they differ in how they approach the problem. The thing that strikes me as incredibly naive about Pete is how he states that values are the policy. He's been frequently shown to say things like, I'll figure it out once I'm elected, as opposed to having the answers ready. Values and policies are inherently different. The left and the right both believe in democracy, liberty, civil rights, compassion, justice, and we could go on and on. Sure, they might disagree on certain values, but people within the same party tend to disagree on values as well. And that's fine because values aren't the focal point of government. The government's job is to have a comprehensive, laser focused policy aimed at facilitating the values. The values naturally will reflect our policy when we elect leaders that share our values. So anybody can run on a platform of compassion, but that doesn't mean anything is going to get done. Anybody can run on a platform of prosperity for all, which is what a lot of politicians do. But that just almost certainly always is an empty promise. So this is why Andrew Yang is such a refreshing candidate, because he's focused on policy rather than spewing sentimental platitudes in hopes of grabbing votes. What are your thoughts on this, Cody?
Yeah, I have to honestly compare Pete to a similarity to Trump, to be honest, where he just kind of has these talking points and he knows it's what people are looking for. He's got the quote unquote answer for it, but he doesn't have any idea how to get to that answer in actuality. And it's just very unfortunate and disappointing to see more candidates doing this instead of fewer. In this day and age, we need substance and we need real answers to problems that are only getting worse and problems that, such as climate change, could possibly be the end of the species as we know it. So, Pete, using these kind of talking points without having the answers, like you said, it's just goes to show that he is not necessarily the best candidate for the option. And as you said, Yang is consistently laser focused on his answers. He doesn't try and attack or smear other candidates. The debates were recently, and in both the debates, he was very concise on what he was saying and got to the points very quickly and addressed a lot of points all at once. And after that, he just allowed the next person to speak without attacking their character or their own policies. And that's what we need to see. We need to see people who are focused on the issues, not just focused on basically personal gain or getting elected. So the next thing I want to get to, which is a very important issue for every single candidate running right now, which is the Medicare issue. And Pete and Yang kind of have similar plans regarding this, but we'll discuss the differences here in a second. So Pete wants to do a Medicare for all who want it plan, basically as a public option that people could have or opt into. And I think this is kind of the right solution to the Medicare. We don't want to eliminate people who are getting private insurance from their employers, especially immediately. And basically, the way that Pete sees it, and as well as Yang, to be honest, is that once you create a public option that is run by the government and gives the government the bargaining power that consumers lack right now, then overall we should see either prices lower for private companies or just more people will go for the opt-in solution of the Medicare for all who want it. So their plans are pretty similar on the basis of that, but Yang is more detailed once again on how to get that accomplished. He wants to go after pharmaceutical companies specifically. He wants to address how doctors are constantly overworked in terms of their schooling and things of that nature, and are riddled with a lot of debt by the time they get out of schools. So it's less and less incentivized for there to be doctors, especially American doctors. A lot of the doctors we have now come from other countries, which is a problem. So he sees this from a bird's eye view. He's tackling it from all angles. And, Pete wants to reduce drug prices, but he doesn't really have any plan of doing this. Yang, like I said, wants to go after the companies specifically responsible for hiking these prices up, and he will also is willing to allow the governments to remove patents and do general or generic drugs that are basically identical to these overpriced drugs that the government will sell to people if companies continue to act nefariously. He also recognizes the opioid crisis in a more detailed manner than Pete does. And it's just interesting that Pete has more support right now than Yang due to, um, these lack of policies and talking points that he has are somehow garnering him the support that Yang is not getting. So I hope to see that change as people are beginning to think harder, which is, one of Yang's slogans.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely Andrew Yang has a much more comprehensive healthcare plan than Pete. Next time I want to talk about was actually universal free college, which is something that Pete and Andrew Yang have a drastically different view of. Pete has a different plan than universal free college. He wants free college for those of low to middle income, which might be arguably better on the margins. But the problems of free college don't fundamentally change with his proposal. The reason is because it still doesn't address how and why colleges are too expensive. If we can't fix that, then we are just transferring the price to taxpayers, who will still have to pay an exorbitant tuition fee. Yang addresses how college is expensive. He talks about the bloated administrative costs and how that can be solved. But Pete is just kind of similar to Sanders and Warren, just saying make it free, taxpayers will pay for it. And another issue is that people will abuse the free college, regardless of if it's for everyone or for just low to middle income kids. Kids that go into debt and pay tuition to go to college often, party, skip classes, and end up not graduating. The graduating rate for colleges are actually fairly low. In some cases, less than 50%, depending on what school. So how many more kids will just do the same, especially when it's free? The point is that college isn't a human right. It's an investment towards your future. This is, again, something that many people are failing to understand. College isn't for everybody. That's why Yang is proposing emphasis on trade schools and giving people an option to go to college through universal basic income if people want to go, which I know might not cover the full price tag of going to college, but it will significantly help. And I think that's the better way moving forward, as opposed to saying free college to a select few that meet the requirements. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And it's, first of all, if Yang is able to tackle the pricing issue of college, and you have $1,000 each month from two parents, is if you just raise a single child and you're kind of struggling to make ends meet, at least the UBI will cover college, or at least it should. Yeah, once the prices get lowered, like I said. So, yeah, I think that, like you said, Yang, we've already covered this, but he just is able to see this from a broader scope, as with all issues, and just trying to hand out free college to everybody who isn't going to benefit from it is not the right way to go, and a lot of people haven't recognized that yet. So I hope that Yang keeps talking the good talk there on those issues, because he's absolutely right on them. And the next thing I want to talk about is how Buttigieg wants to add consumer protections to a lot of different issues. So he wants to start regulating predatory lenders. He wants to hold credit card companies and banks accountable, and he also wants to protect people's personal data. I think he has a good idea on going after the lenders and the banks, but he isn't exactly clear on how to make them accountable, especially these large credit companies and banks. And Yang is extremely specific on his policies and how he wants to go about this. So, um, Buttigieg kind of just has talking points here once again. And Yang wants to find or go after all these companies that are committing crimes and fraud. He wants to call crimes what they are, crimes, and he wants to take these wealthy CEO and Wall Street hounds into court, as well as any predatory lenders, and he wants to hold them criminally accountable. He's not going to let people just pay a small fee out of court that barely pays for the damages that they've even done, or pays for a fraction of the damages that they've done, and then walk away scot-free. He's going to make them criminally accountable, and he's going to send people to jail if he needs to. He also realizes the error of trying to just protect people's data like internet history, which people already readily give away. So he wants to actually make it a legal property that people have. He wants to count data as a legal property, and he wants to allow people to then sell their data to these companies that are using it for whatever reason and gaining money because of their data collecting, such as Facebook and these high-tech businesses. Or he wants to give the option of opting out of having your data collected, because as he would classify it, it would be your property, not theirs. So they would have no right to it if you decided they didn't. And I think this is just a much more modern and innovative solution to the problem than a lot of people have. And a lot of people don't really address the root of the problem, which is just the fact that the data is already out there and there's no real legal way to protect it unless you make it something like a personal property, and it would count as something that is legally binding in that way. And he also has much more broad scope ideas for consumer protections, like going after companies for robocalling and just small other things like that that are very detailed in his planning. So he just has a much broader scope of policies to protect customers and consumers than Pete does.
The next thing I wanted to talk about was what Pete put on his website as racial justice. Now, his website isn't as bad as Biden's, but it's certainly lacking in any real details and substance as to how he plans to accomplish any of the things he purports as policy. Everyone believes in racial justice, but that doesn't make it policy. Now, he actually has something that resembles policy in what he calls the Douglas Plan. Unfortunately, when I clicked read the plan, it redirected me to a basically blank page with a picture of him. So not a good look there. But after a few Google searches, I was able to ascertain what he actually believes in and wants to do, and it's to revitalize affirmative action while investing money into healthcare, specifically for Black people, since Black people have a higher infant mortality rate and statistically lower levels of education. Now, this again is just addressing a symptom and not the cause. Many Black people have poor health and lower education because of inner city gang culture, single moms, exploited youth without parental figures, and how it perpetuates and creates a cycle of stunted growth. This is what needs to be addressed. The problem isn't healthcare. And if you want to fix the actual problem of why Black people have higher mortality rates, instead of investing in hospitals, invest in people and find ways to actually help them as people fundamentally, which is what Yang is proposing to do. He wants social programs and wants communities to get involved. One of the programs he mentioned was Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America, where mentors can help these youths in exploitative, impoverished communities. Affirmative action is also against meritocracy and is racist fundamentally. It suggests Black people aren't good enough to do well as others, so they need help, while it puts other races at a disadvantage. Instead, work on fixing inner city Black families. Make it so that being a single mom is less viable and likely to occur. Get rid of gang culture and try to promote a more cohesive community. That's when real progress will be made, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's like you said, basically you can't just give more money to the hospitals without at least educating people and getting them to change their own behavior, because what good are overpriced and well-funded hospitals if people aren't going to go to them, or go to them until they desperately need them and not get the preventative care that they should have gotten? So, like you said, Yang just sees this in a much more enlightened way than anybody else. So the next thing I want to talk about, which is kind of a twofold. So one of the issues is minimum wage, which Pete wants to increase to $15 an hour. He also wants to bring back the overtime laws from the Obama era and get paid leave for families when you're um, first give birth and things of that nature, for maternity leave and paternity leave as well. So raising the minimum wage that high would basically hurt small businesses the most, and it wouldn't be getting more back from the companies, which is really the purpose of increasing wages that much is in order to make the companies more responsible and accountable and to distribute their wealth more. So the real way to do that is to do what Yang proposes, which is add a value added tax to these uh, basically to everybody, but those that are making less than 180 or $90,000 a year are not going to lose any money from the value added tax. They're actually going to gain from it with EVI as well. So he wants to add the value added tax and make these really high, uh, big companies that aren't paying any taxes at all, like Amazon, and put the money back into the hands of everybody without forcing small businesses to close or fire their employees by raising this minimum wage that high. It basically gets the same thing accomplished, but it doesn't hurt small businesses or decrease the incentive to hire more people or even start a business yourself. And Pete also wants to extend the benefits that uncovered workers get. So he's not exactly specific on whether that is his Medicare for all, or if that doesn't get passed, he's going to have another plan in place for them, like forcing companies to also cover their currently uncovered workers. And again, this would only hurt small businesses and basically not really affect the big ones that are already offering these kinds of benefits to 30-hour employees anyway, like Amazon is. So he just doesn't have a modern solution to these problems the way that Yang does, and his solution is to essentially just hurt small companies and make it less incentive to start your own company by raising it to $15, which is too high for a lot of areas and a lot of companies. And another thing that he wants to bring back is organized labor, basically a homage to the unions of the old days. And he wants to try and keep these unions alive, strengthen them, and keep the same job for every person. And that's another 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. And Yang sees the real issue, which is automation, which is directly affecting the disenfranchised neighborhoods such as black communities and poor rural areas that swung for Trump in um, the last election for the president. So his bottom line solution is that giving $1,000 to these disenfranchised communities, as well as any other person in America, is going to uplift them more than giving them a union to be a part of that is going to die in 10 years anyway. And that is how you're going to give people the best way to rebuild their communities if they choose to. And they also have other options. They can leave their community and move somewhere else. They can even start their own business if they chose to with UBI. So there's just a plethora of options that this gives people that are disenfranchised in our country right now. That a lot of these things that Pete is suggesting are not going to help them. There's a lot of inner city people who would never be able to work in a union. McDonald's isn't going to suddenly unionize, so it's just not the right solution to our problems right now.
Right. There's no real benefit, or I should say possibility of organized labor or unionizing when your job is about to be automated away. So if you're a truck driver and there are going to be self-driving trucks, then there's no organized labor that's going to prevent that from happening. It's pointless because the trucks are going to take over. There's no point of having organized labor for cashiers when it's going to be automated away. And it can be and easily automated away. So a lot of these jobs are going to be automated away. We have to accept that fact. And it's a good thing that they're being automated away in a lot of sense because that's progress. We want more and more jobs and more menial tasks to be automated away. And instead of that being something that's undesirable, we got to incentivize that and say, look, but we're going to be creating new jobs so that our life standards and life quality increases. And it's a multi-billion, possibly trillions of dollars of technology that they're making. Use that as a dividend towards the American people, saying you're part of this invention, you're a part of this society that's doing so well. And that's the step forward. That's how you get these people something to fall back on. And it's still a problem because they still have to find jobs. Obviously, $1,000 isn't going to be enough. But just saying organized labor to kind of fix that isn't an honest response, in my view, or at least not something that's aware of what it's implying. As towards $15 minimum wage, it's far from helping small businesses and the common person looking for a job. It's going to get rid of and close down a lot of jobs and openings because, like you said, it's not going to be viable for a lot of businesses to have that kind of high salaries and high wages. So instead of increasing the wage, like you said, the UBI will just take care of all these, effectively be a $15 bonus, a $15 wage in terms of how the math adds up. And it's going to actually revitalize and help the small businesses in the local community. It's going to open up these stores that are closing down because people will have more money to spend. And I think Pete, Sanders, and Warren, they don't understand this. That anybody that's advocating a $15 minimum wage is in effect destroying, is going to be very destructive and counterproductive, far from being progressive. There was a recent news about Bernie Sanders' campaign team. They had to manage their working hours because he was trying to pay everyone $15. So even within his own campaign and his own team, his policies are showing weakness and inconsistencies.
I was just gonna say it's obviously misleading people when the candidates are just gonna say, "Oh, well, we're gonna increase your wage to $15 an hour, and we're gonna bring all these jobs to your community that are basically retrained jobs. Like we're gonna hire you to do new green work and all these other things." A lot of people, and this has been shown through the studies, as Yang points out, they're not able to be retrained for other work. The retraining programs that we do have a 0 to 15% chance of success rate that are government run. And yeah, it's definitely an issue that we need to tackle and increase the retraining rate and target the people that can be retrained. But to try and just mislead people by saying, we're going to bring these jobs to a high wage and get you $15 an hour, and then when in reality, like you said, these jobs are about to disappear. And Yang is telling the honest truth. And maybe some people don't like to hear that, but we need to embrace it because these are the solutions that we need for the problems that we have, not just trying to ignore or, throw smoke around the problem, make it look like something else. You got to call what it is.
All right. And that's all the time we have for today. We'll catch you next time with a new topic.
Thanks, guys.